Hey, Jake. Jake, can you hear me?
Uh-oh.
Hey,
Hear me?
Jake. I can hear you. You can't hear me? How about now? Can you hear me at all? Not muted, not muted. That's weird. How about now? Jake? Jake? Test, test. Jake?
Hi, Mark and Jake. This is Natalie and Amelia from A Wordsmith. We figured we'd log in and listen in, and if anything comes up technically, we are here to help.
All right, thanks, guys. Amelia, can you hear me? Jake, you can hear me?
This is Natalie, but yes.
Oh, okay. And Jake, you can hear me?
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to switch back then. Hear me? Can you hear me at all now? Can you hear me? Natalie, anyone? Hello, anyone?
Hi.
Hey, Jake, how's it working now? Jake, anything? Amelia? Natalie? Oh, okay. Hey, Kevin. Thanks, guys. Just working on a little audio issue. So, Darren, Kevin, thanks for the confirmation. Welcome everyone to office hours. We're a little rusty, but we're getting back at it. Hope everyone is doing well today. Thanks, John. If this is the first time to office hours, welcome. This is all PKI, no sales, no presentations. This is really our opportunity to get everyone together, talk a little bit about PKI, see what's happening, see some familiar names and spaces and places. Switzerland, good to see you, Patrick. Reba, good to see you back. I see people are still joining in. Excellent. If you haven't joined before, check out the chat channel, say hello. If you've got some questions you'd like to send in, go ahead and do that. You can also put them over onto the Q&A side if we see something good. Hey, Jake, I see you're back with us. Can you hear all right now? All right, he's still working. I told you, we're a little rusty at this. I was looking, the last time that we went through this was in November. So we're all trying to figure things out. Jake, how's it going now? You're still looking great though, Jake. Excellent. Well, we've got a couple of things to go through. Would love to get any questions that you guys may have. We really kind of started this last year, almost about this time last year. And the intent was really to try to have an avenue for people that may have some PKI related issues with COVID and remote workforce. Really provide a channel or an opportunity. I think I just heard a key click. Jake, I can hear you. Can you hear me? This is what's great. I can hear you, Jake. This is wonderful. All right. Well, you're halfway there. So as I was saying, if you've got some questions, go ahead and get them over onto the Q&A. Put them up on the chat channel, and we'll try to get to everything that we can. Dave, I love this question. Gabriel, I know you sent this in a few weeks ago, and or actually it was more than a few weeks ago, wasn't it, in asking about 2038. So yes, we will definitely be talking about 2038 today. Jake, I'm hearing a little more. I see a smile. Does that mean audio is working for you?
I'm hoping so.
All right. We may be PKI experts, but when it comes to remote live events, that's not our specialty, is it? But
Apparently not, yeah.
you're on vacation today, so you're taking us in some fabulous place, right?
As fabulous as I could be, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, it's a nice change. It's not your usual office that I'm used to seeing behind you. So either you have a really nice wallpaper you stuck behind you, or you're in a nice little living room somewhere.
We're down in Anna Maria, Florida.
Anna Maria, Florida. Where is that?
Just some little barrier island just outside of Tampa.
Oh, very nice. Is it a little better than the cloudy kind of early spring stuff that we've got going here in Portland still? Or what's it like in Florida right now? Give me the update. I haven't gone anywhere in a year.
It's sunny and it's nice out. It's really nice out.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, I'm glad you're getting some time away. Thanks for joining in and not making me have to face all of these really awesome questions by myself. Vadams was going to join us today. He's unfortunately not able to make it. These are always kind of a challenge for him for the time of day, and being a night creature who loves to develop amazing things. It usually fits in all right, but he did have a conflict, so he's not going to be able to join us today. But if anything comes up that is code related, or somebody wants to sing, yeah, Patrick, I know, a little cry face there. If there's something that we could pass along, adulation, praise, if anyone has anything that they would like to give feedback to, we can definitely do that. But I think one of the things I thought we'd jump into, and why I'm glad Jake's audio is working, is we've actually had some really interesting PKI problems kind of come up of late. And I thought one of them that we could talk about was the issue of root CA, HSM, failure, and in this case, it was a Connect, a Talus and Trust, all these names now. So why don't we just call it an Encipher HSM, just for old school stuff, and a CRL that was expired for the root, and a failed HSM. So, how do you pull out a miracle on a weekend when a failed root HSM is needed to get the CRL republished? What kind of magic did you do?
Well, for that one, on those the network attached HSMs, there's the two network ports, and some of our clients, rather than use an offline USB based HSM, will do a direct connect or a virtual network that connects only to that other port, so that there's no crossing onto
so
the
like a simple
network.
crossover cable kind of thing,
Yeah,
like from
exactly.
the root to the second port.
Yeah, and in this case, luckily, it was part of the same security world as the failover HSM. So what we were able to do is take the blob, the key blob from the root, which is stored on the RFS server, the remote file server, and move that to another client, and just simply perform an offline or a signing of the CRL with that key, and allows us. We actually had to do that for both the policy and the root, and then reestablish and publish those CRLs out, bring everything back up online, and then operate that way for a short time until we could get a replacement HSM put in there, and it worked surprisingly well given our constraints of a weekend and the level of security in place.
Yeah, and that's always the challenge, is even with the premium deluxe overnight 24-hour hardware replacement, if it's a weekend, it could still be 2 or 3 days. Now, obviously, one of the things we discussed a little bit was shouldn't have waited till the day that the root CRL expired to get it republished. This is one of those reasons why we recommend going in 30 days before, so that, if I can't find it, something's failed, we can kind of respond to it. And we probably could have done the same thing had they originally had a USB type of HSM, right? If it had failed, so I think a failed HSM. This kind of goes back to kind of our emergency CRL resigning pretty regularly. And I know we talk to customers about it. It's even in our assessments, but I don't think I've seen a lot of customers with any kind of documented approach on how they're going to address an HSM failure or resigning a CRL. Have you?
Not prior to us helping or working with it, but within the last year, I've done 3.
Yeah.
And prior to that, it was more of a documentation thing. But it really does work, and it really does save the day when the environment is down.
And Patrick's comment was prepare a re-signed long-lived CRL and backup it. And I've heard that before. And let me tell you what I don't like about it. And it's almost kind of like I was going to say a mutant virus. That's probably not the best thing to say right now, but it's in some ways it is. If you have this long-lived CRL, let's say you decide to make an emergency backup. We set up our CA, and you're like, okay, what if sometime in the next 10 years we have some type of failure? I'm going to create this long-lived 20-year CRL and stick it in a safe. One of the things that you should be aware of is once that CRL has been exposed, systems cache that CRL, especially if it's a root. It means that if you're ever in a situation where you expose that CRL because you're like, hey, I can't get my HSM going. Well, whether it's 20 years, 5 years, a year, at some point you're always going to be creating these longer. It is the fact that you're not going to be able to effectively manage your PKI with that long-lived cert. So if you create a backup one that's good for 2 years, when you do one as opposed to a month or something like that, there's risks with that. So it is a challenge when we kind of have those backups. I much rather see a process that says, rather than relying on this crutch that could expose us, through a longer-lived CRL or accidentally expose it or forget to publish a second one, let's make sure that we're renewing our CRLs early, that we've got some documented process of we're going to go to a backup HSM or what those processes are going to be like. So there's definitely challenges, and this isn't the first time that we've seen issues like this, right, Jake?
Yeah, no, and when we talk about placing that CRL, even if it was for another month, what I see with clients is even when we and with COVID, we have extended with some clients some of the overlap, but almost like that reserve gas tank, we start driving on that. And then that starts baking into our base validity, and we still forget about it, because then as soon as we say 13 months, then people aren't signing until 12 and a half or whatever.
Yeah, it kind of becomes well, okay, I guess I got another 30 days or 60 days. I'll wait to do it. So it would almost be nice, like if your PKI went into overlap mode of some big flashing, annoying, like the car beep that you get when you don't put your seatbelt on. Like you're like, I know I'm running. It's constantly annoying me, but unfortunately, your system will go right into CRL overlap, and nothing's going to tell you. It's not even in the event logs. It just keeps on going. Maybe we need to do that. Well, maybe we could create like a really smart little device that sticks on top of the PKI administrator's monitor, and the light starts flashing red whenever a CRL goes into overlap, and it makes a annoying little beep. This guy beep. This something that will force you to go do something, right?
If Adams was here, he'd actually, just from that, he would be working on it, and then he would start not listening to like our meetings.
That's probably a good thing. He'd probably have it halfway coded by the time that we were done with this call. Absolutely. The other thing I was going to bring up was an issue I worked on, and I know you and I talked about, and strangely also related to a root CRL. So this was another environment that we worked on. And this one, they contacted us because the root CA was lost. The irony is this is actually a PKI that I had built for them many, many years ago. I think it was probably about 2015, so it wasn't too long after I had started the company. Had set it up, and they had HSMs in place, and they were virtualized machines. The root, the issuing CAs, connected to also an in-cipher HSM. It's almost like we have a preferred set of hardware we work with, but hey. And in this particular case, one of the things that never got accomplished was having a backup of the CA other than snapshots. And we talk about snapshots quite a bit of the JET database having issues with host level snapshots. And if you haven't seen this or haven't heard us talk about this, check out the blog on our site. We talk about the JET database doesn't commit index files, doesn't commit backups when there's a snapshot. It simply doesn't know what's happening unless there's some type of guest OS level agent to kind of trigger a system state backup. So we always recommend using one of our scripts to back up the C8 database and configuration files. And that never got executed. So they were doing snapshots, they were okay. But it was a root. And what we always tell customers to be worried about, it's a VM that's turned off for a long period of time. And inevitably, it was the classic scenario. The VM administrator sent a note out to a bunch of people saying, hey, these VMs haven't been used for a while. Is it okay to purge them? Is it okay to get rid of them? Somebody didn't realize that one of them is the root CA, and it got deleted. Well, that was months and months and months ago. So the backup of that VM even rotated out of the snapshot system they were using. So the archives of those backups were gone. So the CRL was coming up for publication, and luckily they noticed it. I think it was about 2 weeks before the CRL was due to expire for the root. They realized that the root was gone. There was no backup. There was no way of recovering that. And we kind of did something that I've largely theorized that we could do, and people still think I pulled off some kind of voodoo magic. we replaced the root. We didn't replace issued certificates. We didn't replace the issuing CAs. We created a new root and we made everything work with it. And Jake, I think you still kind of like shake your head at kind of this craziness of when we did this. Nope, we didn't have the key. The first thing we went looking for was, do we have a copy of the key? Is it in the HSM backup somewhere? Nope, did not have the CA key. Brand new key, brand new root, magically made everything work again.
Right.
Is that a little bit of weird voodoo stuff?
It was. And the thing that I thought out of all that was how seamlessly it all transpired, and and then also some of the tricks we used of part of the renewal and then waiting and not finish that renewal, but then having the public key to get everyone ready for when we cut it over. And it was, I think, one application. Well, I take that back too. But this would affect anything. Heads up, Intune doesn't like when you renew or come in with a new root. Either way, new or renewal. But other than that, one Cisco telephony appliance, and that's it.
Yeah,
that's the only thing that had any issues.
This is when I wish my wife knew what I did for a living, right? Where I could go home and she says, "What'd you do today?" I go, "Well, honey, I helped this company save off the entire crash of their PKI, and in 2 weeks we did the impossible." So at a high level, essentially what we did is we built an entirely new route. And then we took the subordinate CA and we renewed it, but we signed it from the root, the new root. So the chaining, if you do this the right way, and there's lots of iterations and things that are in there. So there are some not trickery things, but if you put the right things in the right places and you do the right types of things, you can renew the subordinate, submit it to a new root. And then if you put the right pieces back into place, then the systems will simply chain up to that new root. So it's almost like doing a cross signing. And in some ways, when you think about when you renew a root, you're kind of creating a new root. The PKI is defined by encryption keys associated with certificates, and those are used to kind of build the trust chain. In this case, we, instead of renewing our old root, we created a new root and had a new key, and then we chain things up. We did have to go back and do some trickery simply because we wanted to make sure that nothing would still see the old chain past the expiration of this CRL. So that was a little bit of the trickery that we had to do. But the risk of root loss is something we talk about regularly. We often get asked, can I put my root in the cloud? Can I put into a VM? Can I put into a laptop? And I know my opinion is often none of those do anything to improve security. It's often kind of an organizational pragmatic decision. No, Patrick, the CRL wasn't valid. While we were doing the work, it was valid, but the root CRL expired in 2 weeks. So we had to completely get everything replaced onto a new root, publish a new CRL to replace the old one. I know. Yeah. No, the clouds, the laptops, the virtual machines, they're flexibility for organizations, but they pose new risks. I know, Jake, you see this in deployments all the time, right?
Yeah, trying to decide what format the root will follow, and what's best, and kind of what I've fallen on. And I had one client I was working with that we went with a laptop and then a root virtualized on that laptop in VMware Workstation, and we actually had, because it was a brand new laptop someone had purchased, and they put it back in this room. They didn't put it in the safe. We were still working on it. They took and re-imaged that laptop in the 1 week I was there. We already lost the laptop. Luckily, we made a backup of it and just moved it over to another platform. So just that in that single week, it kind of saved us, and we had a USB HSM. So so that adds a little security there, so it can't just walk off.
Yeah, there's not much else in the IT space where we have a critical system that is turned off. for extended periods of time. So when people see things like a laptop that's sitting somewhere or left in a safe, it's like, well, that is clearly not used anymore. I should take that and make that my machine. That looks pretty good. Or we have something more nefarious go on. At least when they were kind of rack mount kind of equipment, we could lock it in a cabinet and we knew who was getting in the cabinet and they were at least knowledgeable. Or you could put giant stickers. Do not remove. Yes, we know it's turned off. Contact Bob. It's kind of crazy what happens to these root systems. And even in talking to organizations, and we'll start talking to the operations team or data center team, and they go, you want to what? You want it turned off. Well, how's it do anything? So it's kind of like this weird thing.
The other thing that I see that sometimes pains me is we were working with another client and they asked for a physical server, and nowadays you basically get something in these specs, and they got a monster server, and it's a root, so it's going to be on 10 minutes a year. It's 128 gigabytes of RAM. I mean, this thing was a beast. It should have been a host for a bunch of VMs, and it came up. We did our thing in the root. We powered it off. And so those roots, they don't have to be much, but something like that is probably almost more at risk of being repurposed, since it was such a giant server.
Yeah. Kevin made a comment here that he does offline CRLs valid for 2 years with the plan republishing every 6 months. One of the first things that come to my mind with that approach is the fact that means your CRLs are good for 2 years at a time, which means if I publish it today, anything that looks at that CRL is going to cache it until June of 2023. Yes, I am going to come back and republish the thing in 6 months, but anything that's already looked at the CRL is going to have a cache for until 2023. So republishing every 6 months basically just means I'll have an up-to-date CRL for new systems, but most organizations don't have a massive amount of turnover. So, there's lots of different approaches to CRLs and managing the offline routes, but we tend to see some pretty crazy stuff out there. Publishing CRLs early, good thing to do. Make sure your root doesn't get deleted. Make sure it doesn't get stolen, doesn't walk off. Someone even had a comment here a moment ago about putting the root in the cloud. We get that one asked quite a bit as well. And that's all the same risks as VMs, plus being online and exposed and potentially deleted, and who knows what the providers may do in the background too. The other thing I thought was interesting was the fact that as we were going through that swap out of the root, it happens occasionally, but the customer was a little uncertain that we could perform the magic that we said we could do. I think they were kind of expecting, oh, well, you're going to have to start all over. You're going to have to issue 5,000 new certs, and it's going to be this big upheaval. And I go, no, I think we can do this and not have this. I don't think I even said think. I simply said, we can do this. This is not going to be as big of an impact. Trust me. And every once in a while, people don't.
Well, the biggest complaint I got out of all of that was as part of the in Intune, when you rekey a root, again, whether it's new root or just a renewal, there was a couple of users that their mail didn't properly sync back, but that was the only complaint that we got out of that. And I said, to me, I think that sounds like, if that's your only thing that happened out of your entire enterprise, that sounds good. And unfortunately, it always happens to like the big names, and that's who it was.
Yeah.
So they didn't see it as a win, but they didn't understand what probably should have happened had it not been for what actually worked.
I know. Sometimes, like if you save off the massive disaster that is there, sometimes the customer is like, well, I guess that wasn't such a big deal. It's like, no, you were about to fall off a cliff, but
Right.
in any case. Well, we've got some great questions coming in, so let me pull a couple of these and we can toss them out there. Patrick had a question. Companies like Apple and Google are requiring validity periods of web server certs to be not more than 13 months. And this is really tied back to the CAB forum requirements for commercial certs. And Patrick asked, what about enterprise CAs? For example, can companies continue to issue web server certs with validity periods of 36 months? Just like we've seen from past enforcements of things like SHA-1 to SHA-256 and lifetime enforcements, all of these things that we see are around the trust stores that are inside of their trusted root program. So the Mozilla program, the Microsoft program, Apple Safari, they all maintain their own root store programs. And that restriction is really driven by the CAB forum that those Google browsers or Apple are either putting into the CAB forum or making decisions on their own, which has happened before. The good news is largely not affected internal PKIs before. So as long as you're continuing to issue them from CAs that are not part of those trust stores, you should be able to issue certs that are SHA-1 or 5-year lifetimes and not have an impact. There's always a possibility of a coding error, and there's always a possibility that a browser update could have a problem. But the intent is that those are not really focused on the commercial or internal space. So that kind of stuff you should be all right to get along with that. See, Jake, why don't we put this one to you? Patrick asked, I'd like to discuss version 2, version 3, version 4 templates. I think version 3 is bad. I would prefer version 4, and my colleague says version 2 whenever possible. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I would say, honestly, it kind of depends on who's driving it, because non-Microsoft, I know, like for instance, getting certificates on Apple devices, for instance, when you roll those out via AirWatch or some of the other MDMs, they say don't go past a version 2 template for those types of use cases. And it comes down to, and this still trips me up after all these years, if you happen to do web enrollment, that still every once in a while trips me up, that I'll have a new template. I was like, I know the permissions are right, but it'll be past a version 2, and now I can't see it to do web enrollment on it. If you happen to be using that, so you're looking at kind of whether or not you need a version 2 template for web enrollment or some other use case. But the thing with the version 3 for me anyway was it was that little stopover that didn't offer the flexibility that the version 4 templates do, where you can still do the legacy cryptographic provider versus the key source provider, and you can basically work more into those certificates when needed. So that's usually what I do for most clients is we'll have the primary web server cert or something that we're rolling out, and that'll be a version 4, but then we'll have a version 2 that they can use through the web enrollment or however they need to get like a certificate for an appliance or something, a non-Windows device. That usually seems to work out best, because that allows them that other avenue to get those certs and not have to do like a cert rec or something.
Yeah. And I know I tend to be an advocate of the version 2 approach of kind of like let's not stir the waters. Version 2 covers 99% of the capabilities that you're going to need in a cert, and then there are specific use cases where you have to do a version 3. OCSP responder certificate has to be version 3. If you're creating NAC certificates where you're creating thousands of certificates that really shouldn't go in the database, you need a version 3. If you're doing the IIS auto renewal like you were talking about, you need a version 3 to do that kind of stuff. If there's not a need for these kind of fringe cases, I'm a big fan of keeping things at version 2, simply because we know it will work on the web enrollment site. It will work with Apple enrollments and across those platforms. and limiting those places. And I often say you're not a bad admin because you have version 2 templates. You're not going to score bad on an assessment that we do. Your PKI is not going to be like at some weird functional level because you're doing version 2. It's simply when people go, well, I guess I upgraded the server 2019, and I guess I need to make all my templates version 4. If you want to and you've got the compatibility, sure, but you may be introducing complexity and problems for no particular reason. Patrick had kind of follow-up needs for version 3 or 4. It depends. The primary ones are OCSP signing, NAC or NAC-NAPS kind of scenarios, massive enrollments without going into the database. If you want to do IIS auto enrollment and have the subject name be reused in a renewal and have that automatically rebound in an IIS. Or if you're doing something specific where you're trying to target a particular cryptographic provider on the client system, where most of the time from a CA you say, hey, give me an RSA 2048 key, you don't care what provider, or key attestation. So those are all examples of things why you may want that, but not necessarily something that you do every day. Well, we'll come back to your questions in a minute. One of the other things, Gabe has been very patient in waiting for us to get to this. After our last webinar, he had sent this question and we weren't able to get to it. So there is kind of a pending year 2K-like issue when it comes to certificates. And it has to do with the year 2038. And it seems like it's pretty far off. It's 17 years in the future right now. But the 2038 problem, and you can look this up on Wikipedia or other types of sources if you want, ultimately go back to this, that the time encoding of things like validity dates and certificates all reference a arbitrary point in time, and it goes back to the Unix, is essentially January 1st of 1970, and it's the number of seconds since then. So when you look at a certificate, if you were to go in and look at the encoding, it actually has a very large integer that corresponds to when was it issued and when does it expire. And it's all referenced based on how many seconds have occurred since January 1st, 1970, and there's a particular time in there. Well, that is a 32-bit integer and can only go so big. So essentially what will happen is in the year 2038, that 32-bit integer runs out of room. And like most types of integers, what will happen is it goes up in a positive way, it gets to that number, and it wants to keep counting. So it's going to take that positive number and flip to a minus number. So suddenly it's going to start counting backwards from 1970. The reason that this is an issue for us right now is the fact that when we stand up CAs, we're not just issuing certificates to entities like users and computers for 2 years or 3 years, but we create certificates for our root CAs and issuing CAs, and it's not uncommon to create a 20-year root, which means right now we have certificates that are potentially being created that will be valid past 2038 because it would take it to 2041. So it is a little bit of the Y2K issue, and that is essentially based on the code that is used to validate things. The encoding itself, there are ways of addressing this issue. We could, for instance, have a magical patch that touched every system and said, don't count up from 1970, count from something else. But that integer can only be so big, so we'd have to look at additional encoding issues. So part of the issue right now is no one really knows what systems are going to have this problem, what's going to happen, what particular applications are going to have problems. There's already been some impact to things. There was a great reference in the Wikipedia site, if you look up year 2038 problem, about AOL software. And I guess they had some arbitrary query that they did. They never wanted to time out, so they essentially put in a date in the future, and it actually wound up being a certain number of seconds past that date and hit the 2038 problem. But there's not a great answer. I do have a note off to Microsoft and Paul Adair, who's the current program manager. He's been on this office hours before. I'm going to assume that he is on vacation as opposed to not responding to my question. Maybe there's not an official statement yet, but I don't know what Microsoft knows or doesn't know about this. I can say right now we are not making significant changes to how we address this, in that we haven't seen anything puke as a result of 20-year certs, and we're doing them today. We haven't seen systems today, at least looking at that expiration date, because that's something that happens whenever chains are validated. Now, does this come from a trusted chain? Is there anything expired? And with that root being there, the fact that nothing's puked yet could be a positive sign. I mean, who knows? So it's something we're aware of. I haven't seen anything definitive saying it is going to be an issue, or we've tested it, it's not an issue. So continue to ask the question, be aware of it. Certainly as we get information from Microsoft or PrimeKey on their product or Intrust, there's a lot of places that could be. If I had to take a guess, where we were going to see issue is on the supplicant side, on the client side that's doing validation, because from the CA side, we can update those things easily. We can change the encoding. Microsoft can release a single patch. Inevitably, it's going to be some appliance you bought 5 years ago and is still in use 10 years from now. Some piece of software that somebody's written in-house. It's going to be the fringe cases, but it's kind of our Y2K type issue. Jake, are you worried about it?
Well, no. Of time and roots, I had a case recently where, so Gemalto / 4 other names, with the safe nets, we tried to boot up the root to re-assign a CRL just recently, and they hadn't timestamped the driver for the root. So we go to bring it up, and the root won't recognize it because it doesn't trust that driver because the certificate had expired. Yeah. So on an offline, so time can come back to get you. At times. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a great little, what would we call that? Time can come back and get you in time. Not an anagram. We'll come up with something there, but yeah, lots of good issues. So Gabe, thanks for bringing that up, and hopefully, just the visibility will drive some things. I think there are probably going to be some things that have to get fixed. Some of it may simply be things that people are thinking about in the future. There's nothing sexy about fixing it. It's not going to be as widespread as Y2K. Ironically, it could be bigger. I mean, we all know that PKI kind of like drives the internet, it drives everything that we do today. It's so behind the scenes. It's not going to be as visible as Y2K stuff. Hopefully we won't see massive outages in 2038 like we did, the telephony routing systems in the UK going down because of an expired cert. Essentially what's going to happen, it would be as if certs expired or they were suddenly untrusted or something like that. The impact will be there at some point. Let's see, what else do we have going on? A couple of things that we've been seeing. We've been getting a lot of questions from customers around cloud integration. That hasn't really changed over the years, but it certainly seems to me that we're getting more questions about what can we put in the cloud, what can we run in the cloud, why can't I have my own cloud, what is a cloud? Why is there not PKI as a service? Jake, you're seeing this in the projects that you're working with regularly, right?
Yeah, quite a bit. The biggest thing recently is a couple of clients at the same time. We had 2 different clients, one doing a fully managed, one doing a self-managed instance of the HSM as a service. And so working through that, trying to just make sure that is all configured the way we want it to be, but then at the same time, getting the questions from they're in-house teams that are utilizing, in this case, they're utilizing the Azure service that will cert the Azure machines. So we have this boundary of the service that they're currently hosting in Azure can be certed, but that doesn't come out of the cloud. And if they want to use those internal HSMs for key protection, they can, but those don't come out of the cloud. So finding a solution, and it almost has to be an externally hosted, like we're doing for these clients, the HSM as a service where we can bring the cloud to the hosted HSM and the on-prem to the hosted HSM, because that's the only way. It's the common denominator for everyone to talk to it. So I feel like this is really getting some traction just within the last 6 months. And it's taken off, and from the way it sounds like in talking with at least on the Intrust side, it is really gaining traction, and they're adding a lot of equipment to keep up with it.
Yeah, and the interesting thing there is we're still. It's the same thing from the PKI perspective. I mean, once it's kind of set up and working, nothing really changes. But there's a little bit of a different approach of what's the timeline and getting them spun up, because services like Intrust are actually racking equipment when you set up a new service. So there's a little bit of kind of what's the lead time and the questions that they ask, and you had to even kind of express to me that they're still trying to figure out the process. Like some of the questions they ask is like, but wait a minute, we're doing self-managed. You shouldn't be asking, what type of security world is going to be created. It's like, doesn't matter to you. Just set up the equipment and give me access. So they're still learning this world too.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. The idea that they could have a single document doesn't fly. And when I ask these questions, then they realize, hey, we need 2 separate documents for this. One size doesn't fit all, or basically just strike through the ones that we don't need to answer. But they are definitely feeling those growing pains and getting that rack. And then the other thing that came out as part of this process is if we want to account for 2-person integrity, now suddenly it's not just our internal team. If it's a fully hosted, now how are the teams that are racking and building our security world on these HSMs to make sure that they're doing that and to refer to their documentation. So it just kind of branches us out a little bit to where it used to be we would call out internal team names in our certificate policy, for instance, where now we have another entity that we need to rely on and their process, which their process is solid, but we're calling out to them.
Yeah, and kind of the cool thing is we're seeing scenarios where we can kind of do a hybrid, on-prem HSM, cloud HSM, single security world, load balance. So we're not having to put 2 or 3 pieces of equipment on-prem. Patrick had kind of a comment and follow up to someone around kind of PKI as a service that we get asked quite a bit about. And there are services like Intrust that provide what I would call a managed service offering. They create a route, they subordinate something, they provide an integration to you. You could kind of see it as a PKI as a service. It's not as easy as just go to Azure, click a button, and you have a private PKI that's spun up. It's a contract-driven, per certificate pricing, managed product. Kind of same thing with Key Factor. They'll stand up a route, they'll put an issuing CA into your Active Directory, put their product over the top for lifecycle management. It's in the cloud. You don't have to manage it. You don't have to run it. It's not on-prem except for the issuing CA. So it's kind of also a managed offering, not really what I would call PKI as a service. Like I think that the holy grail is essentially I could go into AWS or Azure or Google, push a button, a route's built, an issuing CA is built, and it's integrated into my Active Directory, and I do enrollment. Patrick commented about Google. So I actually just wrote, it's not quite that simple, Patrick. So I wrote a white paper for Google on their new CA service. It's not quite PKI as a service. It's a signing authority. They will create a CA. But there's no enrollment engine. There's no rules processing. It doesn't integrate into Active Directory. You need to go out and get Venafi, or you need to manually take those requests up there. You have created a CA as a service. PKI is a whole lot more than just a certificate authority that will sign something. Now, where are they going? That's interesting. Anush Sabori, who is the product manager there, is a former Microsoft ADCS product manager. So there's some interesting faces that are at Google now that used to be at Microsoft doing ADCS stuff. And we all know that Google loves to do things in the cloud. So if I were a betting man, sometime in the next couple of years, I suspect at least for home use, small, medium business, we will probably wind up seeing things like a PKI as a service provided. It probably won't be as secure or as integrated as what most large organizations want, but it will certainly address those that are essentially looking at, do I stand up an enterprise root CA and get some basic certs off of it? There'll be some options that are there. And then obviously you go with the PKI as a service, you stick it in the cloud, you wind up good gads. Yes, exactly, Brian. Good gads. You kind of wind up with a long-term dependency if your PKI is in one particular cloud provider. And it's something I don't necessarily think that we see a lot of cloud portability, but I'm a pragmatist in some degree in that I always want customers to be able to say, we're unhappy with AWS or Azure or Google, and say, we're going to pick up our stuff. And most other kind of workloads, you can say, we're going to move this application to that server. We're going to pick up this thing, and we're going to move it over there. If you start building PKI into a particular cloud, you're stuck there for a while. So it's definitely one where there's some cool things we can do with the clouds. I think I know some of the designs I've been doing with customers lately, we've been even looking at putting things like OCSP responders into the cloud, leveraging cloud for HSMs. Besides the CAs, what are some of the other components that customers wind up asking you about for kind of cloud integration stuff?
For me, the biggest is publishing CRLs and online responder. Those are the two I think biggest, and I think use cases that fit the best, the earliest. And now as we're seeing more and more, I know you and I had a conversation of when would it be all right to put kind of a middle tier type CA to use the cloud, and I think things aren't as black and white as they used to be. So sometimes I think it might make sense. Other times, it doesn't. So, but to your point about exportability, that's one of the things one of the clients we're talking to, I had them ask to find out. So if we're all in on Encipher or whatever, and we need to leave, what happens to the keys in the security world? So I'm hoping I have an answer when I get back from vacation.
Well, that one I can tell you. And it's the old adverb. If there's enough money, anything is possible.
Right. That's true.
They all have break glass scenarios. Now, I won't say how much it costs. Let's just say it's prohibitively expensive.
Right.
But anything can be done. Interestingly enough, this ties to a question that Bill had put in, and goes thoughts around exposing the CRL and OCSP responders externally. So, putting things like CRLs, OCSP responders in the cloud is certainly one option. You could also simply say, we've got some on-prem systems and we're going to expose them through reverse proxy or through public-facing things. CRLs are relatively low risk. I mean, essentially, we're talking about maybe a denial of service. If somebody really beats it up, deletes it, if they manipulate it, they can't inject information, but they could certainly cause systems to go, hey, I can't trust that thing. So there's always kind of the nefarious thing, but no one can really extract things from the CRL. You could put the OCSP responders in a cloud provider and use an HSM, a cloud HSM. Great example, really those OCSP responders could work with a certificate that's good for a week or two using a cloud HSM. So if you decide you don't want to do it, you tear it down. A little bit of issue around getting a responder certificate renewed and out there on a regular basis, but I know one of our standard things is we recommend create a DNS alias that could be resolved internally and externally, because you never know what you're going to want to do down the road. So, make it, crl.contoso.com, and then if tomorrow you want to expose it, you don't have to reissue things. You simply, on your external DNS, have it point to where you want that to go. Let's see here. We got another question. This one is from Richard. He said, would you recommend migrating an existing offline root CA and issuing CA from server 2012 R2 to server 2019? I want to end it there, but no. It goes on to say, or creating a new PKI to replace it. So what advice would you give, Jake?
Usually, I look at how dirty is the old PKI? Is it worth saving? And how much cleanup are we gonna have to do? I think the best question, and maybe this is a trivia thing, Mark, that you stumbled onto the other day. If someone still has a 2003 R2 PKI, where do they have to lay over before they can go up from there? Because remember you asked and you verified it, and I actually I couldn't get 2003 to load anymore, but Vadim still has a valid 2003 PKI. But anyway, sorry. But when you're doing these migrations,
don't be a hater. Don't be a hater.
Well, he gets mad at me because my systems get beat up. His are all pristine. But when you're doing that migration, looking at what you have to work with, and if it's in good shape, then by all means, move it. If you're 2012 R2, then you could pick that up, drop it down on a new OS, and keep going, do your database maintenance.
Yep.
And that saves some money and time usually in just new OS.
Yeah, exactly. So it's I think you hit the nail on the head. Is it something that you trust and you're okay with? No reason to build a new if you're just trying to solve the OS issue. Just migrate onto the new OS. So definitely get off of 2012 R2. And end of support kind of thing. Let's see, what else we got here? Question around ever use a YubiKey HSM. Me, myself, personally, I have not, but we have had customers use them for their PKIs. It's often after a lengthy discussion around, is it what you think it is? It's not just a in-cipher device for $500. It's an entirely different beast. And there's certainly things that enterprise-grade HSMs with operator cards, PED keys, role separations, and quorums can do. Things like YubiKey HSMs emulate those things, and they do it all through passwords and text-based things, incredibly small, about the size of a thumbnail. That kind of presents its own challenges. How do I keep the thing from falling out of my laptop? How do I make sure it doesn't disappear? Where do I store all of those text-based passwords and activation data? How do I make sure that can be done through quorums or remotely? But we've also had customers who have designed some very elaborate PKIs that are incredibly physically secure, and the UBHSM worked fine for them. So epoxy, I use this stuff called Goop. If you've never seen it,
I've used that.
Shoe Goop. It's a siliconized rubber adhesive. Works great. You can see through it. All sorts of wonderful things. And then you're on the reverse side of how do I make sure that 5 years from now, when my root dies, that I can take the thing out and move it somewhere else. So you still want it to be removable. So in certain scenarios, UBHSMs, yes. Issuing C8s, never. They are incredibly slow. I would not put it up there for anyone that is looking at, should I get a enterprise grade HSM or a UB HSM? Where it fits into my book is, Mark, it's either no HSM or a UB HSM. And I go, all right, it's better than nothing, literally, in that case.
I would actually see one. I've never got a chance to play with one. I will say that I have the opposite problem. I can't get any of my YubiKeys keys out, and they all have that touch thing. So when I touch them, then they go bananas. Like I can't get it out. Like especially the USB-C one. So I have no doubt they won't fall out. My fear would be they'll get recycled because they're not large enough to stand out. And and someone goes to replace the chassis, they don't
Yeah.
they don't pull that out. So I would like to see how they function, how they would compare speed wise to the like to the USB based HSMs we've used from SafeNet or
Yeah.
Fortalis and Trust.
Yeah, it's not bad. You know, they do a pretty decent job of kind of publishing performance data. So you know, we can look at it. They're not bad. They're frankly they're surprisingly faster than I expected it to be. I think in a couple of things I looked at, it was faster than say the Encipher Edge HSM for certain types of operations. So
Okay.
yeah, it's a trade-off. The great thing is the majority of the time people are thinking about for things like root CAs, and there it's like I really don't care if the thing took me 20 seconds to sign my CRL versus milliseconds. You know, it's a once a year, twice a year sort of thing. Most people are not that rush for time in the data center where they have to worry about it. I think we've got time for one last question here from Darren. Darren asked, I'd like to see effort to get Microsoft to develop ADCS or maybe an Azure certificate services offering. They started as the leaders in a very limited race, and now third parties are offering better services around private certificate automation and zero trust and so forth. I agree. I think Microsoft is painfully aware of it. There certainly have been the right. How do I say this without saying too much? There have certainly been enough curiosity from providers like Google and Microsoft that at least tell me that there are thoughts about what the future is, and I think they are not foolish in realizing that the cloud providers such as Microsoft or Azure need something to compete in this space. But when thanks, Patrick. Yeah, when's the next PKI book? I think this is going to turn into the Ronin. Yeah, what was the Jimmy Kimmel thing and never enough time for Matt Damon, right? I think that's just going to be what happens with the PKI book. But in any case, I think we'll see something from Microsoft and others in the certificate services space. I just don't know when. I know for a while I was chasing them for things like the cryptographic provider that would allow ADCS to use Azure Key Vault, a very easy thing. It just never came out. So my hopes were kind of dashed there. So I certainly won't hang my hat on any of those future things. Well, we're quickly. I can't believe it went by so quickly this time. So we will be doing these again every month. So we're getting back on schedule. We've got some new task keepers that are doing a marvelous job in making sure that we are staying active in this space. As always, you can follow up with any kind of questions. You can send them to myself or Jake. If you've got some amazing things for VATMs, send them to VATMs. If it's not so amazing, send to me. I'll make sure they don't get to VATMs. And we'll be back with another one of our webinar series. In about 2 weeks, we'll be sending out information on that. So visit pkisolutions.com/webinars for any of our industry and vertical related topics in a little more formal format. Look forward to future office hours back in July. We'll have that announcement and invite your questions. If there are questions we couldn't get to, send us a note. We'll follow up where we can. And send your questions in ahead for next time. And we'll do our best to get to those. With that, we'll wrap up the hour. And from Florida, Jake, anything
back
you'd
to
like
vacation,
to say?
baby.
Back to vacation. All right, man. Enjoy Florida, and don't come back all suntanned and disappointed after vacation. I want you ready to be back to work on Monday and saying,
Look, I got my PKI shirt on. I brought this on vacation with me.
Oh,
good,
very
yeah?
nice. I want a picture with Mickey Mouse in that shirt now. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we appreciate you stopping by. And look forward to talking to you next month. Take care.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Enjoy your day, Jake.
Thank you.
All right, man. See you, man. Bye.